Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't worry. I'm back with my third video on this channel, talking a little romance. As you can see, I am in a new location. I am actually visiting family. So typically I live in Peru all the time. I live in Cusco. But right now I'm visiting family in Idaho, and I thought it was so beautiful out in my parents' garden. And so I'm out here. If you can hear little birds chirping or like bees buzzing, that's why, because you're outside. And also that's why I have my little travel mic. Hello, welcome to my channel. Anyways, I'm very excited about today because I'm talking about romance books. And also, like, how romantic is this? Can we just acknowledge that? So I feel like I just want to kiss a boy in these bushes. But I'm talking about romance today. That's the vibe I'm feeling. These are the romances that I have read most recently, or four of the ones that I've read most recently, and they're all delightful. Some I loved really a lot. So I'm going to basically start with my faves and end with my least faves because I want to talk and celebrate and be stoked at the beginning, and then I'll end in some shit talking, as I love to do. But the first book that I'm talking about today, it is Funny Story by Emily Henry. Obviously, if you've been reading romance, if you have been existing in the book talk, bookstagrammer era world, you've definitely heard of Emily Henry. You've absolutely heard A Funny Story. And I've recently just started picking up Emily Henry's. I have read Book Lovers and I have read one of the other ones, but Funny Story is my absolute favorite. I loved Funny Story. I give this 5 out of 5 stars, literally no notes. I know I have looked on Goodreads. I know other bitches out there do not feel the same way I do, and that's okay. That's what's beautiful about art and books and all these good things is you get to have your own opinion, right? It's subjective. And for me, Funny Story hit all the right perfect points for a rom-com. It was funny, it was witty, it was adorable. I loved both the characters. I loved their like evolution from like allies through a shitty situation to friends to lovers, and literally no notes. If you have not read this book or heard of it, the plot revolves around this character Daphne and Miles. I'm so bad at the character names. And Miles, and essentially they both get cheated on by their partners, and their partners end up together, if that makes sense. So Daphne's engaged to a man, the man leaves her for a woman, and that woman was dating Miles. And so they kind of end up in this like ragtag situation where Daphne becomes roommates with Miles as like a last ditch effort of just needing a place to live where she is. And so she becomes roommates with Miles. And so they're kind of like dealing with this really crappy, crazy situation together. And like I said before, it builds into this cool friendship, which then builds into them falling in love. And the whole concept to me is just so funny. You have like some really fun tropes, like fake dating and just like good witty banter and all the things I kind of like, but they do it, Emily does it in such a fun, cool way that it makes the whole story just like chef's kiss. She's hilarious. I think that she's pretty much known for her banter between characters. Like you just can't beat it. Like the back and forth between them two is just so good. And it like kept me entertained from beginning to end. I really felt like I fell in love with both Daphne and Miles, and you kind of saw their like perspectives on how they got to be who they are now and got themselves in really crappy situation with their partners, but then also side characters that are in there add so much depth to the story as well. It makes for really well-rounded characters and well-rounded story. Yeah, so for like a fun, cutesy romance rom-com vibe, it's honestly such a 10 out of 10 story. She does it all. So if you're looking for something that's going to make you happy, it's going to make you laugh, it's going to make you feel things, you're going to love this one. And so I absolutely recommend it. It's definitely my favorite Emily Henry that I've read is Funny Story. It's so good. I love it so much. And also themes in the story as well. So like self-betrayal and boundaries and cheating and things like that can be really heavy topics and not something that's easy to read. But I think Emily balances it in a way where it allows you to feel for the characters. It allows you to be able to relate to it as well and be like, okay, I've understood feeling this way or betraying myself in this way, but also does it in a lighthearted way somehow as well, where it doesn't feel like something that's going to drag you down. So I highly recommend this book, especially if you love romance or rom-com or Emily Henry. You're going to love this book. The next romance I'm going to talk about is The 7-Year Slip. This is also all over Book Talk and Bookstagram. I loved this book. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I actually read this book for my book club. So I picked it because I had been recommended it a few times by a few different people. And so I thought it'd be a fun one to read for the book club. And by the way, I mention this in every video, but if you want to be a part of the book club, it's so much fun. I add 2 books to the book club every month, and it allows you to either read both or one or the other, so you can kind of pick the genre you like. It's so much fun. So I would love to have you join. Link is in the description if you want to join that. But 7-Year Slip we picked over the summer, and it was a great one for a book club. Lots to talk about. Really a great story. But if you haven't heard of it, the story centers around this character, Clementine, and her aunt passes away before the book even starts. And from there, she basically ends up inheriting her aunt's apartment and goes into this apartment and ends up having this magical element to it. So if you go into the apartment, it can hop back 7 years in time. And so she meets this man, and this all kind of happens right at the beginning. So I'm not giving away anything crazy, but essentially they end up falling for each other. And it's this interesting dynamic of being the 7 years in the past to present and kind of how they built it together. I really loved this book. Some of the girls in my book club felt, like it was okay. They didn't absolutely love it because there are like a couple plot holes, which is why I didn't make it 5 out of 5 stars, mostly in the characters themselves, where I felt they did some things that didn't really make sense for who they had been developed to be, or they would overreact about things that you're like, doesn't seem to fit the character's vibe. But I personally loved it because I love romance, but I also love fantasy. And so I know some people weren't stoked about there being kind of a whimsical fantasy element to this story, but I loved it. I love having a little fantasy, a little fiction, a little, douse of magic in there. Like, I'm all about that. A little time travel. That's just fun. So I loved the whimsy of this story. I loved Clementine. I just felt like it was a story that really drew you in, and it had some interesting new fresh elements that I feel like I don't typically read in like the standard rom-com genre of this time. And so I loved that. I loved seeing something different, a fresh take on romance, a fresh take on like a little bit of fantasy element. It kind of almost made me feel like it had the magical element of like a childhood story, right? So where it's not too deep, there's no like crazy, there's no magic system or anything like that, like a typical fantasy book, but it has like a little bit of magic that changes the day-to-day just enough for you to be kind of pulled out into this new world. And so that, I was a huge fan of that. There's a couple things, like I said, the characters, like especially the male character, man, what was his name? Dude, I don't know. I think his name's Iwan. Honestly, when I read it, I was reading Ivan, and I don't know why I was reading Ivan because it's spelled Iwan, but my brain decided to do that. And so Ivan is how I read it. And then when I went to the book club, they're like, it's not Ivan, it's a W. Then I was like, okay, fine, bitch, judge me. No, just kidding. Anyways, Iwan, whatever his name is, he had some moments where hopping from like future to the past, I was like, Iwan, who are you? Figure out who you are. So that's why I docked it, but it wasn't enough to ruin the story or take anything away from it. It just was enough to maybe pull me out once or twice where I thought, does that feel right? Is that correct? Is this the vibe we're going? Ivan, whoever the hell you are. But it definitely took away from it a little bit. Some other people were more bothered by it in my book club than I was. Overall, though, I felt like it was a sweet story. I highly recommend this one, especially if you like a little magical element, then you're definitely going to love this one. And it's super cute. It's just mushy gushy love. I mean, obviously if you read romance, you love some mushy gushy love. And that is in this book. So 4.5, highly recommend. And next book. Next one is The Duke and I. I'm going to be putting the author names right here, so you'll get to see who these authors are, but like I didn't write them down in my notes because I was lazy. But The Duke and I, if you have existed in this era right now, you have heard of Bridgerton. Bridgerton is all the rage. She is queen. She is living her best life right now, Bridgerton. And so I watched all 4 seasons. I binge watched them because I didn't find out really about Bridgerton until season 4, which just came out. I ended up binging all of them in a row. Or is that season 3? Either way, whatever the latest season is, I watched all the seasons in a row. And I loved it. I thought it was super fun. Felt very theatrical, over the top, not very historically accurate, but a good time. And so I decided, when I found out it was based on a book series, I was like, dude, I have to read the book, because usually the book is always 10 times better. So I read the first one, which is The Duke and I. That's what the whole first season of Bridgerton is based on, is that first book. And I had some feelings about this book. Let's just say that. I gave it a 2.75 out of 5. So not quite like a D. I would give it like a C, basically. If you don't know the story, this is supposed to be kind of a, I can't even think what's the era, like 1800s time. And it's like when the time when girls had to go be like debuted into society, right? And so they get introduced to all the men, and the men court them, and they go to the dances, and they wear the pretty dresses, and Daphne ends up kind of setting up this fake dating agreement with the Duke of Hastings, Simon, and they decide that it's mutually beneficial for both of them. It allows Daphne to seem more appealing to other men, and allows Simon to keep all the mamas who are like always trying to get him to marry kind of off his back, right? So they create this little like alliance. And of course, you know, it doesn't stay that way, but that's not really ruining anything, because if you're reading a romance book, you know like where it's going to end up. But essentially, the story itself, for one thing, the writing was a little interesting, because you're reading this book where you know it's based in like a certain historical era, but the writing itself felt very modern, including like the dialogue, the way they speak to each other, how they talk. It's like they have little pieces of what feels like of that era, but so much of it feels modern language with just like a sprinkle of some like, you know, thus or something like that, right? And so it didn't feel like a historical novel. However, putting that aside, I kind of expected that because I watched the show. I wasn't expecting some super, like, I'm not reading a historical fiction, and it definitely does not feel like a historical fiction. The show itself does not feel like that. It's very, you know, over the top. The outfits are like super gaudy and bright and crazy, which is not really of that era. So I kind of knew that going into the book. I'm not going into it for an accurate thing, but more like a fun kind of cosplay of it, right? So you're going to some event where everyone's dressing up as that, but you know, you're not really trying to go back to that era. And so the book definitely had that same spirit as the show. However, I felt like as a book, it pulled me out a little bit more, because I'm like reading something where I just felt like I kept getting pulled back to modern times, and it just wouldn't really mesh right. So that was part of the reason. Also, part of it is the characters themselves felt, I don't know, like there'd be moments where it's like, oh, for my honor and my duty, I have to do this. But then like the next moment, it's like completely disregarded. So it just felt like the author decided she wanted to do whatever the fuck she wanted with the story, and didn't really care about whether it made sense totally. I did love the dynamic between Daphne and Simon. I thought they had really fun, like witty moments. I felt like their flirting was really cute and a little sassy too. And so I think they had like a good dynamic between the two of them. And also just the Bridgertons in general. I love their family. That's why I loved the show, honestly, is I love the Bridgerton family. It kind of reminds me of my family. I'm one of 5 kids, and there's like so much chaos. Everyone always has some opinion, but we're all so different. Super competitive. And so that's like a really fun dynamic. I like the Bridgerton family. However, I'm not going to give anything away, but for anyone that's read this book, you're going to know what I'm talking about. The ending has really questionable moment where if the roles had been reversed and a man had been doing what the woman was doing, heavy. I'm going to put a little plot hole. I mean, not plot hole. What's that freaking called? Anyways, about me ruining the story. What's the freaking word? A plot. Anyways, I don't want to give anything away. So essentially, I felt like it was real questionable. It made me feel icky, made me feel gross. And I said, why did you do that? Because you could have done what you did in the story without having it be so gross. So that was something that totally took away from it. I think I docked a whole point for that. So yeah, the book overall, it's cute, it's sweet, it's kitschy, it's corny. I read it pretty quickly, but overall, not my fave. And I'll tell you this, I ended the book and decided I didn't even want to read any more of the series. So that's how I felt about it. It was good enough that it was kind of like eating junk food. You're like, I'm gonna eat junk food for breakfast, but like I'm probably gonna eat like a full meal for dinner because I can't continue this. So that's how I felt. Why I don't want to read any more Bridgerton books. You can decide what you want to do with that. Okay, the next book that I read recently is The Love Hypothesis. Again, I don't remember the author's name. This book, I gave a 2.5 out of 5. So I liked it a little bit less than The Duke and I. And if you have not heard of this book, it follows this character, Olive, who's a PhD student, essentially is trying to protect her friend. And so she kisses this professor of hers to try to fake date him, like prove, okay, I'm dating this guy, so that her best friend could then go date this other guy. Explaining this so weird. But basically, it's a fake dating trope. Again, I just realized that 3 of my 4 books that I picked today are fake dating tropes. Essentially, she fakes dates this guy and pretends to be dating this professor because it's somehow mutually beneficial to the both of them. I'll get into that. And so it's kind of the dynamics of like academic stuff. So she's a PhD student in science and like all this good stuff. And then like she's falling for this professor guy, but like she can't really admit it because, the classic. Anyways, this book I honestly really liked at the beginning. I felt like it pulled me in. I thought it was cute. I really liked the PhD not PhD, the like educational institute as a setting. I think it was pretty interesting. I liked how Olive was like a total badass, very smart, very intelligent human being. And so that was a cool element to the story. I felt like the setting itself was almost a character, and you kind of got to be pulled into a world that for me personally, I don't really understand at all because I don't have my PhD, nor am I probably ever going to get my PhD, nor am I really a scientist. So for me, it was fun. It was kind of like going to a fantasy world because I got to learn about something that I am never going to explore on my own. So I liked that. Also liked the main character, Olive. I thought she was really interesting. I think she's pretty well developed. However, the main things that pulled me back with the story were it didn't really make sense reality-wise, like why they were choosing to fake date. I guess I saw the benefits for Olive, but also it was like, just tell your friend, just be honest with your friend. Like, why are you making this whole elaborate plan when you could just tell your friend? So it seemed like that would just solve a lot of problems. And then also for the professor, which I can't even remember his name. What's his name? Dr. Carlson. Dr. Carlson, I'm just like, dude, what are you getting out of this? Like, why? Why would you do this? Like, why? Why would you fake date? Which that pulls me out of it, because if you're going to do that trope, if you're going to have that fake dating, it has to kind of make sense a little bit. Obviously, it's over the top. It's always going to be over the top because that's just a thing that doesn't happen in reality. But it just didn't make sense. And so that the whole time you're thinking, why are you doing this? And also there was just like some things later on in the story where, spoiler alert, that's what I was trying to think of earlier. I'm so stupid. Spoiler alert. So here's a little spoiler alert. They have like a sex scene later on in the book. And the way the author is writing it is like she's trying to tap into maybe someone who identifies as asexual or, has different drawbacks to sexual connection with people or hesitancy. And I can see why that intention would be really great and that representation would be really great in a book, because you don't really see that. Almost everyone's just like total horn dogs in a romance. But it felt super fake, in my opinion. It felt weird. It didn't feel like it actually made sense for Olive in the way they went about it. It was like in one moment she's asexual, and the next moment all of a sudden like she's not, or I don't know. To me, it just felt awkward. It felt a little off, and it took me out of the story again because it didn't feel like true to the characters in the story. It felt like she was trying to add something because she wanted to represent like a certain thing, but then it didn't mesh right. I don't know. Something about it felt weird. And so I didn't love that aspect of it. Overall, I felt like their love story didn't really make sense to me. And when they fell for each other, I just was like, not as satisfying. So honestly, I think I give it a 2 out of 5, not 2.5 out of 5. The more I talk about it, the less I liked it. I still finished the book, and I'm never going to give a book less than 2 stars if I finish the book, because that means that Otherwise, I just would have DNF'd it. Like I don't finish books that I don't like. That's just, my life is too short to finish a book that like is absolute shit. So I think this is between a 2 and a 2.5. I wouldn't recommend this book. I don't think I would say that you should go seek it out. I've heard good things about some of her other books, so I might try those out. But The Love Hypothesis itself, not super exciting, not great. But yeah, so those are my thoughts. These are all the books I've read recently. If you liked any of these books or hated any of these books, let me know. I'd love to discuss. I love talking about books, all things. Also, if you have good romance recommendations, please holla at your girl because I would love to read it. And yeah, so I'm super excited that I got to share this because romance is one of my favorite genres. So I'll definitely be doing more of these videos. But thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe if you liked what you saw. Let me know, send me a message, comment, follow me on Instagram at HannahSoulMarie. I would love to connect with you. Let's be best friends. And yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Toodaloo.